Hi, everyone, and welcome to the AFIKRA Community Podcast. My name is Yasmin. I'm based in Ramallah, and I'm joined by my co-host, Maisa, who's based in London. Hey, Maisa.
Hi, Yasmin. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing this Sunday?
I am great, thank you.
We got to hang out today with your AFIKRA friend, Farrah Berrou, who did a spotlight presentation. And for those who don't know what a spotlight or AFIKRA community presentation is, it's a non-expert presentation that pretty much spotlights a story or a person or anything using just a few sources, and it's supposed to be about 15 minutes long. So Farah pursued her curiosities, and she chose the topic of spotlighting the LA-based attorney George Shibley and his involvement in a murder trial.
Yeah.
But we won't spill any more beans. Let's just dive in with Farah. Hey, Farah, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys today?
Yeah, we're doing great.
Okay,
We're so
thank
happy that we get to talk to you about this today. So let's just begin with talking about this presentation that you did in the Los Angeles chapter. But you're not in LA right now, right?
No, not anymore.
The Los Angeles chapter was one of our newest chapters this year. And you were kind of the ambassador for that. We've been Instagram friends for a while, Farah, but this is the first time we actually talk. And I know that you and Maisa are friends.
Yes.
So let me ask this, like, what's your story with AFIKRA? And is that how you and Maisa became friends?
Informally, yes, but not officially. So I got involved with AFIKRA back in, I'd say 2017. I met Mikey late 2016 when he first moved to Beirut. And then I started to learn what AFIKRA was. It's like, oh, this is so cool. It's a bunch of nerds just nerding out. And there's like a social element involved. And so I presented my first AFIKRA in April of 2017. And I was involved with the Beirut team for a bit.
What was your first topic, Farah? Sorry to interrupt.
It was the solar barge of Pharaoh Khufu in ancient Egypt.
Yes, I remember. And just to plug the AFIKRA library and YouTube channel, you recorded that during COVID lockdown, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So people can
Yeah,
watch
that
online.
was the first one. And then I did another one about cannabis in Morocco.
Wow.
Yeah, I forgot that one. And then I happened to be in LA when the team wanted to start a chapter there, finally. It had been something Mikey and I had discussed a lot, but I wasn't officially based there and I was going back and forth. And so when this was officially like, okay, we're going to do this, there was already a team in place and they're still there and they're hopefully going to keep running things. So this was the first event actually in LA. Maisa and I became friends separately.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. Through a mutual friend.
I kind of knew of her. I knew of her through AFIKRA. She had done one of those like Instagram takeovers once, like a day in her life. And so I was like, who is this person?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking she has great hair. And and then we met at Aboud Abu Jawde's exhibit here in Beirut.
Yes, that's right.
He's a collector of old film posters.
Yeah.
And so my former neighbor was going and he said, Maisa's coming. I was like, great, I'm going to meet Maisa. And basically, now we have a group chat and we're like,
and the rest is history.
Yeah.
And now
so
we have a daily commentary of our whole day to each other.
Yeah.
Featuring a lot of Farah's cat penny.
Okay,
Yes,
so you're in Beirut
course.
right now, Farah. But it's really awesome that we have the Los Angeles chapter, like finally, because it's the first and only West Coast chapter that AFIKRA has. Our chapters are all in the East Coast. Okay, so let's talk about this presentation a bit. Is it a murder story? Is it a murder mystery? What's going on here? And how did you come up with this? How was this whole thing come together?
So originally I didn't want the presentation to be about this. And that's usually how AFIKRA goes, where you start in one place and you end up somewhere completely different. I had been reading this book called, wait, let me bring it up. So it's called Arab Roots, Pathways to Syria in California by Sarah Gualtieri. And it's all about focusing more on the Western U.S. Communities, because a lot of focus when it comes to the diaspora in the U.S. coming from Bled Shem is mostly on the East Coast and in New York and Little Syria in New York. But there's a lot that also was happening on the West Coast, but you don't really have a lot of literature on that. So I was reading this book while trying to come up with a topic for the first AFIKRA in LA. And when AFIKRA launches in a new city, we try to pick something that is kind of related to the location to really draw people in to the topic. And so I was reading this book, and I had originally wanted to talk about grocery stores and how there are so many that are run by Syrians or Lebanese ethnic grocery stores across the U.S. And then my background is also my family runs a grocery store in Beirut. So I was like, oh, I kind of relate to this. And I feel at home when I used to go to these grocery stores in California and feel like people are speaking Arabic around me. And it was like, oh, whenever I was homesick. So I wanted to go that path, but I was reading this book and she was mentioning things about grocery stores and peddlers and the first kind of industries that the Arab went into when they immigrated to the U.S. But there was a chapter where she talked about George Shibley, the LA attorney who was involved in this murder trial. And I was like, what? I don't know anything about this. It was all related to the Zoot Suit fashion, which is also something I had no idea about, the Zoot Suit riots that were in LA back in the 40s. I only knew what a Zoot Suit was because of the song by the Cherry Poppin' Daddies back in the 90s. That's my, and I used to read this comic book that was about Wolf in Red, where a wolf dressed up in a zoot suit. That was basically all I understood of zoot suits. I didn't know that there was all this cultural history to them and cultural symbolism to it. So,
do you have a photo of a zoot suit just for reference?
Yes. So this is a sketch actually by one of the guys in the murder trial. But let me bring up one.
Oh, wow.
Here. So this is from the LACMA Museum. So there aren't actually a lot of zoot suits still in existence. A lot got destroyed, or they reused the fabric, so there aren't a lot full suits available anymore. But it's basically kind of parachute pants in a way. It's very rich in fabric, long, oversized lengths, so long blazers, big collars, bright colors. So yeah, it's inspired from the draping fashion that was really in the jazz clubs on the East Coast and Harlem nightclubs, and of course taken from African American culture, and then it was kind of reshuffled and adopted by Mexican Americans, and it was part of this subculture where a lot of these young guys would dress up like this, and it was associated negatively, oh, these gangsters, how do you put it? These punks, but they were also oh, so cool and hip by a lot of the youth. And so there was a bit of it, a form of resistance, we are going to be loud, we are going to be proud, because there was a lot of, what do you call it? Racism between the white American and then the Mexican population that was coming in. So she was talking about this murder trial because one of the main attorneys involved in actually defending this group of kids was a guy named George Shibley. But in most of the literature that talks about this trial, they don't even mention him. They don't mention him by name. There isn't a lot of any kind of record of his influence in the trial. So we're going to have to back up. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Just so that we know what I'm talking about as far as what trial. So, I believe also this was early 40s, because a few years later is when the riots happened. So early 40s, in LA, there was a place called the Sleepy Lagoon. It's where a lot of people would go swim. It was kind of like a watering hole. It's no longer there, but it was near a ranch. So it was one of the largest mass trials in California history. So mass trial is when you're trying a big group of people, not just one defendant.
Okay.
There were around 21 Mexican-American kids and 1 Anglo-American, and they were tried for the murder of Jose Diaz. Okay, so the Sleepy Lagoon was like a reservoir on the Williams Ranch, what is now like Montebello, California. A lot of Mexican Americans used to go there because they weren't allowed to go to public pools. The reservoir was then called Sleepy Lagoon, like in loose vernacular. But it was also like a lover's lane at night. So a lot of couples would go and like, make out and have their time alone over there. At the time, there was a party that some kids attended the party. There was like a fight that happened around there. And then they ended up finding Jose Diaz's body.
So they
It's
found
not
they found his
exactly
body at the party. It wasn't
near
that he was
the
killed at the
Sleepy
party.
Lagoon, near
Okay.
the party.
All right.
Yeah. So that's the thing. The timeline is a bit messy as far as like the kids were there, but then they went back to their neighborhood and they brought more friends back with them because they were harassed by some white kids. And so like they were there, but they weren't there where Jose Diaz was, but there was a fight. So like it's not that they weren't at the scene of the crime, but like they didn't have anything to do with his death. But it became kind of an opportunity to round up all these kids. So the police pulls in around 600 young people, mostly Mexican Americans, and they're threatened and beaten up. And then we have this mass murder trial.
Okay.
Normally, the
600?
LAPD, out of the 600, there were around 20-ish, 21 people officially tried. And most of them were young. They were under 25, if not younger. And most of the time, LAPD would ignore violence between minorities. They wouldn't really get involved. But because the Zoot Suit culture was getting bigger and they wanted to kind of, I guess, set an example, if you like, they saw it as like a threatening social movement, this growth of more and more Mexican Americans who were being really loud and proud about their culture. Because like I said, these Zoot Suits were very bright and flamboyant and like used excessive fabric. And again, we have to think about like the time period. So we're in the early 40s. This is the time of when people are like kind of tightening their belts on what they're using in terms of material because of the war. So a lot of it is like they're seeing it as unpatriotic.
Okay.
Like they're overusing this material. They're being really like in your face.
Yeah, rather than being assimilating and being just part of the American fabric.
Yeah, so right, and this is after the Mexican Revolution in 1910. It's in the midst of the Second World War. There's a lot of racial segregation between this influx of people and the like white privilege was very much a reality at the time. And you had Japanese internment camps. And then there was also this Bracero program, which was like a governmental program to bring in more laborers. So a lot of different demographics are shifting and there's like a lot of anxiety and it's during the war, So like a lot of socio-political things are moving while this case then presented itself. So in a way, it was like, okay, here's an opportunity to kind of paint a group of people as dangerous.
Okay.
Now, also next to the neighborhoods where this occurred, there was another thing of a Navy armory being built near a Mexican part of the city. And they had to, like a lot of servicemen would have to cut through the barrios to get back to their base. So there's like also points of friction. But so while we've got this trial going on, you have also the onslaught of the media. So there are a lot of things in newspapers that are kind of framing these group of kids as like a gang and also not letting them change their clothes when they're at the trial. So they're looking kind of disheveled and just not being allowed to present themselves in like a change of clothes and like clean cut. they're looking like even more rough around the edges.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then they also
like,
didn't
to fit the profiles. Yeah.
right. They're trying to like mold them into this presentation that the media is also running wild with.
Okay.
The jury was also not sequestered, so they got to see all of this media. There were no Latinos on the jury. None of them had children the same age as the defendants. Basically, a lot of the trial was working against them.
Yeah.
And so,
Except this Arab attorney.
except George Shibley. Yeah. So I'm trying to set the scene. There's so many things you need to know in the background first before we get to his role where he played in this this trial. So the media coverage is going crazy. Even the captain of the LA Sheriff's Office is like kind of saying that there's a biological tendency for Mexicans to be violent. So a lot of things are working against them. And at one point you have this defense attorney, George Shibley, comes in and he's like, he's going to be their defense. And he played a huge role in defending them in this trial. Eventually they get convicted and they go to jail, but he's the one who files for an appeal and he manages to get them off after, I think it was a year or two. But you don't really see him in any of the coverage of it, including like a play/film that was inspired by this murder trial. He's also kind of somewhat erased. And we can get to that later. But Shibley himself, like, why did he see some kind of need to be in this trial? His background is also very important to like his involvement in the trial. He was working in labor rights for most of his career. He kind of saw himself with, like, he commiserated with most immigrant or minority groups because he saw himself as also being treated kind of like an outsider. He was born in New York in the early 1900s, but his family moved to Southern California in the early 1920s. There was a big community of Syrian Americans at the time. He attended high school in Long Beach, graduated from Stanford Law. So he kind of grew up in this environment where there was a lot of prejudice to Mexican Americans, but he also understood what it felt like to be kind of ostracized, because he quotes saying, "People always took me for whoever was being discriminated against." So he was very much like a fighter for the underdog. And that's how he got brought into this trial. He had been working, I think, also like at the time, right before the trial, he was working on like a trial to the laborers at the Ford company. So he was very much like on brand for him to be involved in this. But again, we don't really hear about him.
Did they ever find the real, like, do they ever convict the real murderer?
No, sadly, till this day, they don't really know what happened to Jose Diaz. And he's also a big part of the story that is forgotten. There's so much of the attention goes to the kids that were wrongly convicted. I mean, rightfully so, but also a lot of like key people that were involved in this trial are like not as front and center, like George Shibley, but also like Jose Diaz. Like in the end, it was his murder, but there's only one photo of him in existence. We don't know anything about his life beyond very, very small testimonies about him, like from his mom.
Okay.
There's not much that is there, which I suppose also kind of feeds into the whole idea that it wasn't even about him. It was more of just an opportunity for the LAPD to crack down on this group that was growing and becoming more and more present.
So the actual case was poorly run, and then the story was poorly told later on.
Right. Yeah. And media just fed into it. And so they were convicted. Let me go back. It says 17 were convicted. We have 3 convicted of first-degree murder and 2 assaults, sentenced to life imprisonment. 9 convicted of second-degree murder and 2 assaults, sentenced to 5 years to life. And 5 convicted of assault, 5 acquitted. We also had a lot of the women, the young girls that were with them at this party, They had refused to testify, and they were moved also to this notorious Ventura School for Girls, which is like a really bad kind of like women's prison in a sense. And they also there isn't a lot talked about what happened with the women. And so a lot of this murder trial was just so much injustice, very poorly handled and also poorly covered. And that's how George Shibley built his case to create an appeal to shoot down all these things, because like the judge was very racist. It was all just very skewed and biased. And so like, that's what the appeal and eventual acquittal was built upon. Like that was the groundwork, was that this was like just such a bogus, trial. There wasn't enough evidence. Like it was clear that the verdict was like set from the beginning. So Shibley's defense eventually led to this kind of like inter-ethnic solidarity and a lot more activism. And so eventually they get acquitted. And one of the professors who does a lot of work on this trial and tries to like continue talking about it so that it's not forgotten, he says that George Shibley was perhaps the sole exception among the defense attorneys. He was an instinctive fighter, and he could be relentless in pursuit of his cause.
Sorry, that sounds so funny.
That's from Allah.
It's not me.
That's from Allah sounds. What can I do?
I was like, that's not me.
It's like the tantarara of like what's happening now with George Shibley.
All right.
As a result, he laid down a pattern of objections to the procedure that an appeals lawyer was able to later successfully build upon, but Shibley's doing so also came at a great price. In reading the trial transcript decades later, the judge's animosity towards Shibley is still palpable. The judge grew increasingly irritated at Shibley's constant objections, to the point where he began to openly belittle Shibley during the trial and even threatened to have him thrown out of the courtroom. The jury took all of this in. So like even during the trial, the judge is belittling the defense lawyer. He's also being really racist towards Shibley and saying things like, do you even speak English? Stuff like that.
Wow.
And so all of that feeds into like how the jury views the people, how the jury views their defense. But he kept a log of all of these things, and that's what helped build the case.
So wait, sorry, you're saying George Shibley kept a log of all of these things, all of these like interactions,
of all of these like objections, racial remarks. And so he had this, and that was what kind of made him have a case to actually get an appeal and then an acquittal in 1944. Now, while this trial was happening, in parallel, before the acquittal, there were the Zoot Suit riots in LA. So you had a group of Navy sailors, around 50 of them responded to some assault. So they come into the neighborhoods of the Mexican Americans, and they're going to beat them up. So like a big fight breaks out, and a lot of more and more sailors join in, and they basically are going through the streets trying to find more Mexican Americans to like beat up or rip up their suits.
Okay.
To just kind of like, beat them down basically. They were attacks that went on for days, and most of the cops that went out would round up the Mexican Americans instead. And so a lot of Mexicans were once again arrested for being attacked. So a lot of studies now will say that the Zoot Suit riot, like that's not a good name for it, because in the end, it was more of a military raid. It wasn't the Zoot Suiters that were rioting. They were the ones being targeted. They say that around 500 of the victims were arrested, supposedly for their quote, their own protection.
Right.
And so for days you had sailors and servicemen going through LA trying to find more youth dressed up in Zoot Suits. And sometimes they would round up African American or Filipino Americans, like basically anyone who was like just stood out, I guess, to them. And they'd beat the elderly too, whoever they could find. And more incidents would pop up in neighboring states like Arizona and then Texas, where there were similar like Zoot Suiters. And then the media continues with this, where they go like, there's one clip that I have here that says, Zoot Suiters learn lesson in fights with servicemen. Like it continued to kind of frame it that way, where, these bad people,
Yeah, the media
these
machine.
juvenile delinquents that are here. But yeah, it was all very much within this socio-political context of the Second World War, and this influx of workers and all of these demographics changing, and just like, it was like a, what do you call that? Like a pressure pot, like it was just waiting to kind of explode. And so that's what happened with the Zoot Suit riots. So nowadays you'll hear about the Zoot Suit riots and maybe not know the context of it in LA. When I presented this, no one had ever heard of it. Granted, this is in the 40s again, so it's quite a long time ago, but for something this significant, you don't really know the context of it. So now there's a lot of work to try and like preserve the memory of this time. One way of doing that was Louis Valdez's play in the late 70s. He did a play called Zoot Suit, which was then adapted into a film. But this was the first Broadway play written by a Mexican-American. It then went to New York and became a huge hit. And so these were like, it was inspired by this case. But in this adaptation, George Shibley becomes George Shearer. And so he becomes very like, you don't see the evidence of being Arab in his name anymore. And he becomes his like, the character that plays him in the play / film is a very like Anglo looking man. So it feels like his identity, which is very much part of like why he got involved in this trial, is somewhat erased. Like you no longer see that, oh, he was a Syrian American. He was, he felt kind of linked to this trial in a way. And so you don't see that in that very big piece of like commemorating this event. So this is Jose. This is the Navy base armory that was built near the barrios. And fun fact, where this was built, the Chavez Ravine, is also like something that I didn't know about. So the Chavez Ravine is now where the Dodgers Stadium is. Dodgers is like the big baseball team of LA.
Okay.
And the stadium is a huge piece of land. They built it in the Chavez Ravine, which used to be a really, really like beautiful kind of neighborhood of minorities. And it was almost like they had their own little community there. And that was just wiped out to build the Dodger Stadium.
Okay.
And that was something I had no idea about, but I learned about just from looking into the Chavez Ravine. Because I was like, where is this? And wait, there was a neighborhood here and now it's gone just because it was bought off. So these are some of the media. So here, for example, is one photo from the defense, and the guy on the left with a cigarette is George Shibley.
Okay.
Yeah, he looks super Arab.
He does.
This is why I was asking. I was like, I just, because when you were saying about the play that was made and how he was like totally whitewashed, I was trying to think of like, what does he actually look exactly. Like? I'm trying to think of what they changed.
Was there a misunderstanding? No. I mean, you look at him and you're like, hey, the Marwan, and like like, but yeah, even Galtieri, the author of the book, she was saying how like in the captions of the photos, sometimes his name isn't even mentioned. So like, there is very much his absence in the very small, like the very few sources about this trial. There aren't a lot of mentions of him. Like I looked into old newspapers, and most of the stuff that comes up about him are like previous labor suits and other things he's worked on. But I'll get to why a lot of his good work has been overshadowed by something else that he later was working in.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't know how old he was at the time of the trial, because in that photo with the defense, like he looks pretty young, like to be doing something so
big.
Yeah, to be doing something so big and getting such a great result and everything, like he must have been a great attorney by quite a young age.
Well, he was born in the 1910s, so he couldn't have been.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wasn't that.
And he also kind of did it all. So like labor, criminal law, like
he worked on a lot of murder trials. Yeah, there aren't a lot of photos of him. Like I had to dig through old newspapers just to find what he looked like now, or at least before he passed away.
were these digitally archived, Farrah, online?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was trying to find things about him in the case, or him in just him, like who is George Shibley? And yeah, there's not a lot. But a lot of what is found is mainly things about how he was the defendant of Sirhan.
Can you read us that quote?
The only crime of which I am guilty is that of daring to defend an enlisted man against persecution by a vicious and corrupt clique of brass hats. So this is when he was defending Sirhan, the guy who attempted to murder Robert Kennedy.
Okay.
Wow. So by defending someone like Sirhan, who also had like a similar background to him, and that's how I think he got pulled into the case. I think he had known Sirhan's mother, or there was some kind of like personal relationship that he knew the family or something like that. So he got involved with the case, but his entire legacy became he was the defender of Sirhan. And, you know, Sirhan, the guy who like wanted to murder a Kennedy. So not exactly painting a beautiful
underdog savior look.
Yeah. You're looking at him like, oh, he's defending a murderer of America kind of thing.
And it tainted his past legacy.
Right.
His past work.
So a lot of the work that he had done was then just forgotten, and they were just seeing him as that. Like that was what was coming up the most when I would search about him. Even though he's done so much work for many other cases. And like, this is one of the, I think, my favorite photos of him sitting with his dog in his office. Because their offices are still there in Long Beach. His sons now are working within their law firm.
Oh, that's interesting. So waterfront lawyer, a champion of the underdog. That's the title of this piece.
This is from the article before. He says, I don't ride a white horse as frequently, but I still speak my mind. And if I feel someone is a victim of injustice, God help me, I'll go to his side. Most of his work was for underdogs. And to him, Sirhan was somewhat of an underdog. And he was trying to, make people understand his background and where he's coming from, and like what made this person go to that kind of extreme length. But yeah, unfortunately, everything he did before that suddenly was erased, and now he was just the defender of this murderer. But he worked a lot in different like Second World War anti-racism, gay rights, Palestine liberation. He went to jail actually for 18 months when he was defending a Marine Corps guy, and was allegedly, he was accused of stealing government documents. Even though if you read about the trial, the conviction, it's very like fuzzy. It sounds like he was allowed to have those documents, but yeah, it was almost like they just wanted to put him away for a while. He claims that he was framed, and then the legal community helped him to retain his license after getting out.
There's so much more to look into. Now I just want to Google him now after this, and like,
yeah.
That's the thing. This was supposed to be a spotlight. It wasn't supposed to be a full presentation.
I know,
and
yet a full feature, pretty much.
Yeah, because I just wanted to know more.
From reading that book, like that, just one chapter reading that.
Amazing.
Book. And one thing led to the other, from grocery stores to murder story.
I mean, a cute fun fact about him is that he married an actress named Eleanor Shaw. 6 days after meeting her, she was like attending the trial, and they met. And yeah,
wow,
this trial, the one we're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Okay.
What a love story.
So she met him, fell in love with this man defending,
What a romantic setting, guys.
She fell in love with the hero in him.
Oh, this is so interesting. Thank you so much, Farrah.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting story. Yeah.
So that's a good way to wrap up that that kind of presentation part of this conversation. So you came across this from a book, Farrah. I'm sure you have some good reading recommendations or maybe podcast recommendations.
Just read this.
Yeah, honestly, this book is definitely like a must read. It's not that long. It's not that dense. It's really interesting. I feel like you could do probably like 12 different AFIKRA presentations just from this book.
Nice.
Because there were so many things I would want to Google just after each chapter. And so it's really interesting. And so that's a good starting point. I'm currently reading House of Stone by Anthony Schleid.
Okay.
What's that about?
His family is from Marjayoun, which is a town in the south of Lebanon. It's a neighboring town from the south. It's a neighboring town of where my dad is from as well. So he's talking about how his family home was destroyed in the 2006 war, and how he is rebuilding it. So it's really interesting to read about the South in Lebanon from somebody else's perspective, because he's talking about places that I actually know.
Okay.
So that's what I'm reading now. So far, so good.
Amazing.
Okay.
I would also say read The Arsonist City by Hala Alian. Day of Honey by Anya Sizal. I'm going to say her name wrong, but it's also a story of her traveling with her journalist husband. They're both journalists, between Beirut and Baghdad.
Nice.
It's very interesting as well. And she still works in journalism covering the region now. Podcasts, obviously the AFIKRA podcast.
Besides the AFIKRA podcast.
Yeah. So other ones, a friend of mine runs one called Who Run the World, and it's a discussion between her and her best friend, and they cover a lot of different topics, mostly about women and entrepreneurship and like mental health. The topics range kind of all over the place, but super interesting. And then a podcast that I listen to religiously has nothing to do with culture. It's about dating. It's called You Up.
You Up?
You Up. You Up.
Yeah.
You Up, like the text. And it's just a male comedian and one of the founders of the Betches Media Company. And they talk about dating in this day and age. And they get emails from listeners and they talk about dating problems. And I love listening to it.
Nice.
Awesome.
It has nothing to do with anything like this.
It's fine.
Okay.
But it's great to like do dishes too and clean the house and get stuck in traffic with. Yeah, it's a fun one.
Okay, well, I can get started though. So Farrah, we have some trivia questions for you. No pressure.
Farrah, do you know of any, I don't want to say West Coast, any cities in America that are named after Arab cities or places or towns?
Oh, wait, can I just interject very quickly and say that one of our most recent AFIKRA...
I was going to say that.
One of our most recent AFIKRA podcast guests, what is his name? Fadi Bukaram. I think that's his surname. Who runs a really great Instagram account and like I think TikTok account and stuff all about like linguistics and especially related to the Arabic language.
Oh yeah. Dublin based.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So he went all around. I think it was just the US. Maybe it was like all of North America, where he was looking for all the towns that were called Lebanon.
Oh,
yeah, but I'm sure there's loads of Palestines, right, Farrah? I think there are others.
Yeah. And Lebanon is pronounced Lebanon across the U.S.
as a city. Okay,
but that's
interesting.
That's a great podcast episode with Kerning Cultures.
Nice.
It's called Lebanon USA,
cool.
And it's an interview with him about his journey through there, through the U.S., going from town to town with lots of cool like unexpected turns of what he discovers along the way, and how it links back to Lebanon. Actually, the place.
Nice. So there's 2 episodes to listen to related to this.
I'm waiting for a Baghdad, USA. Then I'll be happy. Until then, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
Not satisfied.
I've looked across Google Maps and you'll come up.
Yeah.
You'll come up on like a random spot in Ohio, and it'll be like Palestine, Alexandria.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is biblical.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Next question.
Another AFIKRA presentation. Go ahead, Maisa. You can run the rest.
So
we have 3 more for Farrah.
My next question, although Yasmin, you might have to help me with the answers here. Name 3 herbs commonly drank in the Levant or wider Arab world.
But I didn't know this is what we meant by trivia.
Right. No pressure for that.
Just
You're only a professional in the drinks industry.
Yansun.
Yes.
Yansun,
that's anise seeds.
Anise. Yeah. Chamomile.
Yeah. Chamomile or baboonage. Yeah.
And sage. Mariame.
Mariame?
Is that what it's called?
Isn't that what it's called?
No idea.
In Palestine we call it maramiya.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool.
No, I'm blaming my dad for that because that's what he told me.
Okay.
It's called in Arabic.
Right.
I was like, Google says something else, but okay.
This was so much fun.
I hope this was clear. There was a lot to cover.
No, it was great. Thank you so much, Farrah.
It's the first community kind of presentation of its kind, I want to say, or at least the ones I've come across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know when this is going to come out, but Mikey and I have been talking about maybe this being a presentation in Beirut for the next AFIKRA, if not the one after. Yeah. So if people are listening and they want to see it in live,
perfect. Before the summer.
Yeah. Nice.
In the summer, maybe. That'd be great.
Nice. Amazing.
All right, Farrah. I hope you have a great one.
Thank you so much, Farrah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That was so interesting. Yasmin, I had literally no idea about so many things to do with the history on the West Coast of the Arab community. Like, I did a presentation years ago about the Arabs on the Titanic, which meant that I did so much research on the East Coast and those communities. But the other side of the country, I knew nothing. So this was great.